Hey everybody, today we're going back to 2008 and taking a look at Metropolys, which is a board game designed by Sébastien Pauchon and published by Istari Games. This one accommodates 2 to 4 players and takes around 45 minutes to play on average. Now the key mechanisms of this game are kind of bidding and kind of area majority, but we'll delve into that a little bit later. The setup is going to look like this. We have the main board here, which consists of these 5 different regions, with the center region and these 4 going around this side here, separated by these rivers. You can see the map is made up of all these different terrain types, which matters, and also has these tokens semi-randomly scattered throughout the map. There's also going to be some additional tokens consisting of these kind of skyscraper tokens here, which basically is going to award people points depending on how many of these areas they control by building the higher skyscrapers there. You've got these additional cards as well, which you can get throughout the game as you take your actions, and also a score reference sheet here. Now I will say there is 2 modes to play this game. You've got the basic family version like this, and you've also got the advanced version like this, but I would say always play with the advanced version because it's not too much more advanced than the basic version. Now each player is going to have a set of these skyscrapers that range from value 1 all the way up to value 13, and additionally at the start of the game you're going to get given 2 cards at random, which is going to be a secret objective. So the first one is going to correspond to a terrain type, so you see you've got all these different terrain types corresponding or correlating to the ones on the board here. And basically what that means is if I get one of my buildings on these regions, then for each time I do that, I'm going to get an additional 2 points. And also you're going to have a secret objective, which might look like this, where you've got ones where you want to be getting your buildings surrounding these little fountains here, or ones where you want to build up 3 buildings in a row connecting, ones where you want to have your buildings on either side of these bridges. And finally, the one here when you want to get 3 of your buildings surrounded by one of these little ponds here. Okay, so gameplay in this game is rather simple, where the first player is simply going to select one of these terrain types and put one of their markers on it. So let's just say the white player wanted this spot here like this. Then the next player has one of 2 options, one of which is to pass and not to outbid the 6 that the white is placed here. The second of which is to outbid the white. And when they do that, they're going to take one of their markers that's obviously higher than the 6, and then they're going to place that marker on any adjacent region to the one that's already been bid on. So they could go here, they could go here, they could go here, or they could go here, based on the fact that you can cross bridges. So let's just say the grey player is happy to outbid and put their 8 like this. Then I'll go to the next player, so let's say it's the reds go. And the red will put their number 10 here, like this, always snaking off from the previous bid. And then it'll go to the blue player, and let's just say the blue player is not interested in raising the 10 because it's too high for them, and they'll pass. Then it'll go back to the white player, and let's just say they wanted to place their 11 here like this. And then everybody else passes because they don't want to raise any higher than 11. Now what's going to happen is that all the players who've been outbid are going to take their markers back to their supply, ready to be used again in the future, and the person who won the bid is going to place their token face down for the rest of the game because they're not able to use it again. Now this is going to count towards area majorities, which I'll talk about a bit later, but it also restricts the board further because any region that has a building in it can no longer be passed through. So as more and more buildings are put onto the board, it's going to get tighter and tighter, and you're going to have fewer options where to spread out. So let's just say in future rounds, let's say a grey player claimed this region and a blue player claimed this region. You can see that this area here is trapped between these other ones, meaning that if a start player went straight in there, say with a really low number, like a number 1, they're going to automatically win that region because no other player has the option to spread out from that spot. Also, whenever you win a region with one of these tokens on, you're going to take that token for yourself, and they're going to do a number of different things. So let's talk about what they do. So these ones here with this fashionable lady are always going to grant the winning bidder 3 points, which is quite a strong amount of points. So that's going to naturally increase the value of that region. You've got these tokens here, which are always going to grant you a negative point. So you have to weigh up that decision of, am I still willing to win that bid and maybe contribute towards my secret objectives? Or not. But additionally, whenever you take one of these negative tokens, you're also going to take the negative card to give you an additional -2 points. So always the last person to take one of those negative tokens takes this card too. So it's quite good to get those done early if you're going to take them, so you're not lumbered with this card. You've also got these subway tokens that look like this. They're all going to be worth 1 point each, but additionally, the person with the most of them is going to get this card here to get you an additional 3 points. And let's talk about some of the other things you're aiming towards. So one thing I didn't talk about in detail was the area majorities like this. So at the end of the game, once somebody has placed all of their markers down, all their buildings down, each of these different regions is going to be calculated by the amount, or the amount of tallest buildings in that region. So you can see here at the moment, this is obviously just an example, both the white and the blue player have their big tall buildings here. They've got one each, therefore it's going to be a tie. Then it'll go down to the next level, which you can see that only the white player has another building there. So therefore the white is going to be the most, or the strongest player in that region. And of course you're going to get victory points based on your secret objectives and depending on how many times you get that fulfilled. So you can score these a number of times if you manage to pull that off by scoring 7, 4, 4, 5 or even different options. And 2 points for each region that you've got your buildings in that particular terrain type. So that is essentially how the game is going to play out. So I've advanced the game state here just to show what the board is going to look like towards the end of the game. And once one player has placed all of their buildings, then it's going to immediately end the game. So you need to really keep an eye on the amount of buildings that each other player has, because they can catch you off guard and maybe leave you with too many buildings in your supply if they choose to end the game, or if they're able to pull off ending the game. And something I should have mentioned as well is that the person who wins the bid is always going to lead the next round by placing their building first. And that can create some quite interesting decisions, because sometimes you will want to win regions, even if you're not particularly interested in it, just because you want to lead the next time. Because as I said, the board is going to keep getting more restricted and cutting off regions, meaning that you can get a lot of mileage out of your very low point tokens just by jumping straight into a region that you know is disconnected from the other ones. And sometimes that can create some quite cool chain reactions where if you keep winning, then you can keep on kind of getting these combos to close off the board again and again and again and again to make sure that nobody else has the opportunity to even place their buildings onto the board. And that is one of the big decisions to be had in this game. So it does get tighter and tighter as the game develops. Also, how you're going to pace yourself is a big factor in this game, because you do only have, I think it's 4 of the large buildings. And if you start using them really quickly to get the very particular spots that you want, then you're going to leave yourself a bit outgunned going forward, because people are always going to be able to outbid you in the future turns. But that's where you need to really start to use the actual spatial puzzle of things in order to close things down, in order to actually pull off the win with the smaller tokens. So it is quite a strange thing where sometimes people can really run away with placing a hell of a lot of their buildings on the board, and you think, well, I'm not winning anything here, I might not get a chance to put anything down. But inevitably, because the board is quite open, at least to start with, you will start winning bids and start catching up. But it is something you need to be on the pulse with in terms of the pacing of the other players. Additionally, you will obviously be trying to focusing on your own objectives, because you're going to get points by getting into the particular regions and also in locations where your objective corresponds to. But you also want to be keeping an eye out on what the other people want as well, and you will inevitably learn what they're going to go for, because obviously they're going to start spending their bigger tokens on the certain terrain types, and you think, well, they're obviously going to go for the grass region or something. But also you need to be on the pulse with people going for certain objectives. Maybe they want to get 3 of their buildings in a row like this, and therefore you might start making a conscious effort to outbid them, to stop them from pulling off those objectives, which is a big part of the winning strategy. But as you are trying to fulfill your objective, you've also got to be conscious of the fact that these cards here are going to be passing around by the actual tokens themselves, because even if you don't want a region, I might not be interested in blue regions, they might have one of these tokens on, which could be worth a massive 3 points. So even though some of the objectives, some of the regions aren't going to relate to your objectives, you're still going to want to compete over them and stop people getting bargains by collecting these tokens. And if you are running away with these subway tokens and you want to keep hold of this card, you might make more of an effort to keep hold of that token, because 3 points is not insignificant. Additionally, as I mentioned before, these negative tokens are important because just passively, sometimes the discs are put on the regions that you want. That's going to happen. And you've got to weigh up the fact, am I willing to take those negative points now and try and get my objectives fulfilled, in order to hopefully someone will be taking one of these tokens later, and it will take the card off me to prevent me losing that further negative 2 points. So it's got a lot of decision space here. So not only your objectives, but also the tokens, preventing other people getting their objectives, and also, of course, the majorities in each of the regions, because a 5-point swing is quite strong. And if you manage to pull off a couple of those, then you're going to probably be in a good stead for winning the game. So the decision space in this game is absolutely plentiful, loads you need to consider with each of your placements. But something I really want to stress is how different this bidding mechanism is, because normally in an auction or bidding style game, you're always competing over the same thing that the start player kind of triggers. This one, you're not. It's always to the adjacent region. So it's like a bidding game, but also not, because you're cascading out to the adjacent spots, and each of these spots is going to have a different value to each player, because kind of objectives are going to be different, terrain types are going to be different, and the desires for those are going to be different depending on the player. So that decision space and how things jump around the map and close things off is just a whole new dimension. It's something I haven't seen before, and I just like how clean it is, in terms of just those two decisions: outbid or pass. Also, the time investment for this game is spot on. It only takes around 45 minutes to play, which is a lot of game in a short time frame. Now, despite praising the elegant mechanisms and the unique mechanisms as well, I will say that the replayability isn't the best for the game, because there is only a certain amount of objectives you have. I think there's 5 in the game, and one of them doesn't really feel quite balanced to me. So it almost feels pretty obvious about what people are going to do, and it almost feels like a moot point in terms of what objectives people are going for, because within a turn or two you pretty much know. So it would have been nice to see some differentiation in terms of the objectives and seeing a whole bunch of cards which would affect the game in different ways, so you really don't know what your opponents are going for, because you only need to learn these, which only takes a second, and you're going to know what they want. It's pretty sharpish. Now, it is obviously more of a reactive game and a tactical game as well, because you're always reacting to the board state. It's always going to develop in different ways. New opportunities are going to develop. So there is that. And I wouldn't say it feels samey each time, but it just would have been nice to have more variety in terms of end-game objectives and maybe different things to go for. Player interaction is fantastic. Obviously, you're dictating your pace based on the buildings of the other players. So, if you know that you've got your big buildings left and everybody else has got their buildings spent already, then you can kind of use that to trump the other players in terms of getting into the majorities and getting the majorities of the regions. Additionally, the back and forth of these tokens here is quite interesting, because there is that competition to get to those metro tokens in order to get those bonus 3 points. And also trying to get rid of that horrible negative card there as well. So there is kind of passive interaction in everything you do, and is trapping players and just creating opportunity for yourself. It's all a part of the game, and it really isn't a game that could operate well without the input of the other players. I think the production of the game is really striking. I like the way the board looks. It's maybe a little bit busy and a little bit frantic, but I don't mind that. It does have a kind of a classical Euro feel to it. Some of the components themselves are fantastic. These buildings are great. These nice solid wooden pieces, nicely clearly marked on there. So it's nice to see a real cool table presence develop as the game, plays on, and it looks like you're building this kind of cool kind of skyscape. The actual graphic design on some of these cards is okay. It's not the best, but it's fine, nice and clear, and the card stock is decent. They're not going to get shuffled or anything, so they are going to hold up quite well. And the tokens as well are nice and clear and are of a decent quality. So yeah, overall I'm happy with the production, especially with the buildings themselves. Something I want to touch on briefly is the scalability of the game. So with a full 4 players, then the whole board is going to be open. With 3 players, one of the regions is going to get closed off, and I think with 2 players, 2 of the regions are going to get closed off, just to make the board a bit tighter. Additionally, that is going to create some kind of opportunities to put the buildings down in the corners, because you're not going to be able to cross these bridges. So it does kind of create that more opportunities to get back-to-back turns and close off regions and get your lower buildings down. But it works fine either way, but personally I'd probably only ever play this one at 3 or 4 players. I don't really have the desire to play it with 2. Okay, so final thoughts on Metropolys. Now, I will say this game is really well designed. It's so smooth and elegant in the way it operates, just outbid or pass, and that unique system of you're not always bidding for the same thing, you're spreading out from the existing spot. That is something I haven't seen before, and I always love it when I see mechanisms that I haven't seen before. There's a lot of things to consider here in terms of getting points, but I would say that something that does work against the game quite a lot for me is how predictable the different objectives are. It would be nice to have, again, more variety in those. But there are, of course, other things you need to fight for, the majorities, the tokens themselves. So there is a lot of competition there, and I like the way that the board gets tighter and tighter as the game develops. You know, when you start the game, it does feel quite open and obvious about what you want to do, but it does become a lot more exciting and tense as the game develops. Now, something I do want to touch on is the fact that I have a lot of bidding games and auction games in my collection. It's a very convoluted part of my collection, and I need to be quite picky on what I choose to acquire because I don't need a million games of the same genre. And that is where I think I might be kind of why I'm not singing from the rooftops about this game, because although I really appreciate it, I think it's a lot of fun and way better than the average game. I think it's a very well designed game, but ultimately I think I've got better bidding games in my collection, and I can't really see myself constantly leaning towards this one above all the other ones I have. So for that reason, really is going to be the only thing to stop it from hitting the table regularly and staying in my collection. But that doesn't take away from the design. I think it's a very good game, something that should be appreciated more. You know, you don't really hear anybody talking about this game, despite I think it's going to get reprinted this year or re-implemented. So it'll be exciting to see if this game reaches a whole new audience, because I think it deserves it. I always appreciate very streamlined, clean designs like this one is. And again, things that are unique. So while I appreciate it, I just can't see it kind of sticking its head above all the other games I have of this genre. And that is kind of my parting thoughts on Metropolys, really. A solid design. In fact, way better than average. But ultimately, it's not excellent, and I'm kind of looking for excellent games now.